have to accept terrorist attacks just because we live in big cities? Well, I say a resounding no. However, the mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, has said terrorist attacks are, quote, part and parcel of living in a big city, unquote. Well, he said this past September after the New York bombing, and now he has an attack indeed in his city, in London, just yesterday. I know what you're thinking. I'm picking on the mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, because he's Muslim, the first Muslim mayor of London. And that's not it at all. I'm picking on him because I don't want us to believe in that way of thinking. If we take this passive victim role and think, oh, well, we live in a big city, we're going to have terrorist attacks, from time to time, that is going to bring on the terrorist attacks because we are going to present ourselves as passive victims to the terrorists. And we're going to be mowed down by terrorists just like the people were yesterday in London. Now, my heart goes out to the victims and the victims' families and all of London. And of course, we are Londoners too, because we can relate to what's going on in their city, perhaps has already gone in our city, wherever you live, and perhaps will be going on sometime in the future. But that doesn't mean we should be victims and expect it and accept it and become desensitized to it. Now, let me tell you about the attack in London, just in case you haven't heard about it. A terrorist who now they finally have identified as Khalid Massoud. He's 52. He has a lengthy rap sheet. He was probably radicalized in prison. And it was so frustrating to me that they were not giving out his identity for quite a while, although they were showing his picture. So clearly some people recognized who he was. But in any case, what's even more upsetting than that is that, in fact, he, just like so many terrorists before him, the Orlando terrorist, the Berlin terrorist, they were under the eyes of authorities. They were investigated and then let go. They were, the authorities stopped paying attention to them because they decided that these people were in danger. And then lo and behold, they went on to commit terrorist attacks. So what Khalid Massoud did was he had a rented car and he mowed down pedestrians with his car on Westminster Bridge. The crowd, just mowing them down, kind of like Nice, but there weren't quite as many people. And then he went into the crowd at the Westminster Palace gates. He crashed his car into the gates. He jumped out, and then he stabbed to death a police officer guarding Parliament. He was trying to get into Parliament, of course, and then he was shot before he was able to get actually into Parliament. Fortunately, of course. So, the death toll now stands at 5, including the terrorist. There were 40 injured, and some of those, one of those actually now has become part of the death toll, and probably there will be more of these injured because some of them were catastrophically injured, and there will probably be a higher death toll. One of the people killed was an American tourist on his dream wedding trip. His dream wedding trip turned into a nightmare. You can really feel for the people who were killed and their families when you hear their individual stories. So I encourage you to read their stories, which are now going on the internet in more detail. When Khalid was under investigation, he was thought to be just a peripheral figure. There were concerns about his being a violent extremist, but just peripherally. And they're still saying there was no previous intelligence about this plot. Well, obviously, or else they would have tried to stop it. ISIS has claimed responsibility. They claimed that before the terrorist was identified. Now, presumably what they're saying about him is correct, but they were kind of jumping the gun. we think. ISIS has said the perpetrator of yesterday's attack in front of the British Parliament was a soldier of the Islamic State, and the operation was carried out in response to calls to target coalition countries. Now, that's presumably true, actually. And then after the attack, 6 houses have been raided. 8 people have been arrested as being suspected terrorists, which is good that at least we have gotten, information that led the government to those people. Now, what's bothering me, though, another thing that's bothering me, you can tell there were a number of things that bothered me about the reporting of this attack. The most prominent attack was and still is the attack of 7/7 in 2005. That is like the attack of our 9/11. Now, in that attack, there were 4 suicide bombers who got on trains and a bus, and they spent a lot more time preparing for their attack. They had to make the bombs, they had to coordinate the trains and the bus, the timing, because the blast went off at approximately the same time. And that took much more planning than this current attack, in which a man just had to rent a car and also get a knife because he knifed, the guard. But that's it. And that's a lot less planning and in a way a lot scarier because, that makes terrorist attacks open to any lone wolf who wants to carry it out. But what's bothering me about it is that it hasn't been enough mention of the victims and their families of the 7/7 attack, because surely they are hurting now too. All of this current attack has brought back the memories flooding into them, into their minds. Brought it back all over again, what happened to them in the past. And I think not only should there be moments of silence for the victims and their families of the current people from this attack, but there should be some remembrances of the 7/7 victims and their families as well. So, what is the bottom line? The bottom line, do we have to accept terrorist attacks if we live in big cities? Absolutely not. Should we be prepared and be more resilient, make ourselves more resilient physically and psychologically? Absolutely yes. Should we have our first responders be prepared with more resources and be able to attend to these attacks more quickly? Yes. Should we have practice runs? Yes. Should we do everything we can to prevent and foil terrorist attacks before they happen? Absolutely yes. But we must never simply accept that terrorist attacks are going to happen as the price of living in a big city or anywhere